Hello, how y'all doing? Last time we dipped into some 1 point perspective and went over that. As we move into 2 point perspective here, we're going to start off looking at 2 point perspective for a cube or cube-like, rectangular, other stuff like that. That kind of shape. A shape with right angles. And that gives us a good base for how it'll work otherwise. So in 1 point perspective, which we covered most of last time, there's a single point where everything converges on. All of the lines leading away from you converge on that point. In 2 point perspective, there are 2 points, and it creates kind of a... Here, let me just pop in here and do a quick difference between those. I should have actually got some perspective grids ready, too. 1 point perspective, everything... Why are you not doing things? There we go. Goes to this point, this vanishing point in the center, or, if you have it up here, they'll all go in that direction. That is 1 point perspective. There's a single vanishing point that everything goes to. Kind of like anime speed lines. And so that's like, if you have a table, you could do that. And then do that. And then look, you have a table in 1 point perspective. Whee! With 2 point perspective. All right, so these vanishing points for this second 2 point, for the 2 point perspective, we have a vanishing point here, just off, and then we have a vanishing point here. And so the difference is, instead of everything coming into the middle, they go off in those directions. So instead of seeing like the front of a cube and then maybe just the top, you're going to see something like that. And that is definitely not a cube, but it is a rectangle of some sort in perspective. It's got a little bit of a warp going on to it, but that's fine. But you notice how these both go off in towards that vanishing point, and these go off towards that vanishing point. Oh, that was just a flat. That's why it looks kind of weird. Should be like that. And then we do something like this for the top. So that's the main difference between 2 point perspective, and I'm going to go into why that is. It'll also go into how 2 point perspective turns into 1 point perspective. Because yesterday we talked about how a lot of times when you're doing perspective, the picture you're drawing, the scene is being set by what you are basically embodying some sort of invisible person that is standing there at some sort of height. They could be very short, they could be very tall, but your eye line means you're kind of a single invisible person who is, or not invisible if you're doing it literally through someone's eyes is for the picture, that is perceiving the environment. To do 2 point perspective, we start with setting up the vanishing points and how it is. Your little invisible guy is this blue dot. And at that point, they are looking directly at the corner of this cube. And so what that is going to look like... All right, so since you're looking directly at it, that's kind of the scene you're going to have. That central line where everything converges is going to be in the middle as well. You're looking right at that diagonal angle. So you'll notice, and this may be me doing it wrong because I don't have a rule or anything, but in general, these shapes on either side, like I drew before, are supposed to be equidistant if it's a perfect cube. This shape and this shape are, if not drawn perfectly by me, theoretically are in existence and look to be the same length. And that is because you are seeing both the same amount of both sides of them from the exact same angle as they vanish off into both those perspective points. You're kind of making a right angle with your arms, and that is where the invisible guy is looking at it, and they want to make an invisible right angle. In this case, it's running along both sides of the cube, so they're staring right at the triangle. When you let that get too narrow, like if you were to narrow your arms and make those your vanishing points, which you'll see right here, as these kind of create where the vanishing points are for this dimension, this red box. If you narrow those too much, that's when you start to get warp, which we talked about last time, but I'm sure we will get to that more. So that is kind of, you try to want to keep a wide berth and keep kind of a right angle from your viewer to both the vanishing points. But we'll see as we move in. Let's say that we were to tilt our view so that instead of looking directly at the corner, we are looking more at one side of it, and the vanishing points instead shift so that it's closer to this vanishing point, but has gotten significantly farther from this vanishing point. We keep that right angle, and then what that is going to look like in this perspective is something like this. Hold on, I'm sorry. Shut this off here. Oh. We're going to see, and I think I have this one set up, should probably be farther back. Should probably try to do like a, see, this gets weird. Still need to play around with how this works inside itself to get the guides. But in general, you're going to have a shape. Let's do screw the guides for now. You're going to have a shape that looks like this, and then you're going to see less of that side and more of the front side, because your view in that situation is seeing that, and then it is seeing kind of that barely. If that all makes sense. Sorry, I'm still getting the hang of the perspective tools using 2-point perspective in Psi. But so as that shifted, the way you perceive the cube is going to shift, and the sides are going to appear to be, different lengths and different sizes due to perspective. If you continue to shift that view until you're looking directly at one side of it, like this front side here, that is when it returns to being 1-point perspective. And then everything is just coming off of this one vanishing point. And your other vanishing point is parallel to the horizon line, to your eye line, so it doesn't exist. You just have this one here, and so everything coming out of it is going to look like it was coming out of that central area. If you continue spinning, you're going to either move out, and again, remember your arms, you're an invisible person with your arms out at a right angle. If you continue past it, as I knock my camera, if you continue past it, you either lose sight of it, or you have to turn back around, and then you're kind of back where you started again, because you've moved completely on to the other side. Did that make sense to everyone? It took me a minute when I was reading it yesterday, and then when I was putting together these graphs, it all kind of clicked for me, so I don't know if it's going to require other people playing around with it a little differently. Okay, cool. Glad that's making sense to you. So then if we were going to do like a shape like that, and do that, and then maybe go down. I'm really terrified to get into 3-point perspective because that shit gets confusing. Saying a bunch of different shapes like that. So okay, that makes sense to at least Marcus. We'll move on, and then if anyone who is watching has any questions, feel free to bring us back to that. That's totally fine. So that's talking about the paper kind of revolving parallel lines, back to 1-point perspective. Now we move into building perspective, placing bricks on the table before you. Sketch bricks with parallel extended to their vanishing points. Place a second brick on the first. This brick can add more parallel lines, which in turn can be extended to the 2 vanishing points to brick number 1. So, in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and make a green. Make a greeny brick, as we've been doing. I'm going to do it out here, because I don't know if it should be directly in the middle there. We're going to go ahead and say you're that. And then we'll say you're a little thinner, so we'll do that. And so with these guides on side, which is nice, is you'll see as I'm doing stuff, the lines change with it. So when I'm doing this, I can follow, I can see where that red line is. So I can stop right there because I know that that's the right distance. If I'm doing this, and then I'm up, and let's say, see right there, I know that that blue line connects down there. When I'm doing it here, I do this blue line, and I know when that green line connects right here at the end of this one. So these perspective, so the perspective tools are really nice, and they also, I don't know if you're here when I've been playing with them, but they also lock you into that perspective unless you turn it off. So like I can only draw in that perspective unless I turn it off. So it's very helpful for blocking out scenes in perspective if you're doing like environments or houses and buildings. It can be very easy to block that out and then so in this case we have this starting brick, and then its lines, as you'll see, run off towards that vanishing point, and then these sides run off towards that vanishing point way over there. But due to perspective, you'll notice they do get thinner and closer together as they get in that direction. So now to set a second brick on top of that one, as was the assignments given to us by the almighty book. So I just do something like this. Move there, might do. We're getting pretty close, so, and then I'm going to wait until I see that green. And then again, you're going to have a very similar, you're going to see these go off here, and then see these go off here. So I have 2 bricks just on top of each other. You can see how they met the vanishing lines. Add more bricks, it says. And so as we do this, we're going to be dropping over the horizon line. So that's one more time that you're going to be able to see the kind of change from the up and down of the perspective grid. Do I feel like that is not the same height as this one? So we want to follow blue. Follow green. Yeah, I really wish I had yes bot everywhere at this point. It's an emote I try to use all the time, and then it doesn't exist. We're already starting to lose our ability to see the top of these bricks as it gets closer to that horizon line, which, because it makes it harder for you to see the top of something as it gets closer and closer to being at level with your view. So that makes sense for us. Wait, why are you up? Because you went too late. So then again, we have both of these vanishing points coming in. Will you cooperate, Blue? All right, Blue, I'm gonna have to do it this way. So then I'm gonna pop up. I'm just gonna do a couple like this. Okay, so we're going to say that this is multiple bricks, and I'm going to do it the easy way. So this is kind of a It's right there. Maybe a little higher. And we'll say this one is also, so we need to try to position you to go upwards or downwards. Nope, will you pay? Okay, turn off green for now. So you'll see now that we've gone over the horizon line. These are coming back. These are now going down towards the vanishing point. Just like with the lamps last week. Okay, so that is how you build a generic blocky rectangular shape, a brick, in 2-point perspective. As they approach the level of your eye, the top of the upper brick appears narrow because lines determining that surface are coming closer together. As we go up, it goes back down. So now this is where it gets into the, like, you can use this general building block, kind of like a Lego, or I don't know, like Minecraft. And you can build, you can just use bricks to build like a building block. So that way, and that way. And you're going to go up, and we'll say there's probably like 2 bricks laid there. So let's do this. Boom. Boom. We're going to say, what, your 2 bricks? And then we'll also say your 2 bricks over that way. And let's do. So about the same width. Technically, I can use this guy here. So I covered this last time, but if you are ever trying to make sure that something is the same length and perspective, like if you have windows that you want to look the same, or something like that, we'll get more into this a little bit later, I'm sure. You can do a crossbar, and then anywhere that crossbar intersects with the lines in perspective becomes a vertical line. In this case, you don't have too much of a warp because you just have the one and they're not getting that far away from the center. But those bricks are the same length, guaranteed because of that. And I'm getting better and quicker with that trick, so that's nice. We'll say these are longer. We'll say you go up there. You go in here. All right, so we know these bricks are, so we're gonna say, let's make these bricks taller. Say there's like, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 bricks here. I'm not really worried about it. But so these are various size bricks. That is correct there. And then we can do like, let's say we have another brick. It goes out this way. And then let's say that brick has a second brick next to it. So we can actually take this one, see how it bisects there, because it's going to be the same length. Do that. And so using this style, you can basically use bricks to build a cityscape in perspective, and then just kind of fill it in with details as you go. Maybe this brick here. Maybe you got something going on here. It's like, and then again, using these to kind of block them out is very helpful. I guess I didn't really need to do that internal plane there. And just do that, that. Do something like that. And then, or maybe, you know, maybe it's taller. So then you have this little road here. You got like this hospital here or whatever. You got a business building here. So you can just use blocks to build up and get your idea of that sense of volume and that sense of perspective while you're getting the hang of things. The edges are all going to stay the same no matter where they are. They're all going to conform to the same rules as long as they are in the same grid. If a building is tilted so that it is at a different like grid or different axes than any of the buildings around it, that will change, and that's something that's going to cover later. All right, so this is what I was kind of doing without taking the time to actually have to go through and do it, just so you get an idea where I was talking about, where you can use those blocks in perspective and then feel free to use them to create like a small cityscape or something like that. A city in perspective. Bricks or blocks are arranged end to end and side to side. Now add more to the top building of the various piles. A city can thus be drawn by the use of 2 perspective points in a line of vision. When you sketch a city from the window of a high office building, keep in mind that the buildings you see are nothing more than bricks, piled up in the manner just explained. So yeah, now we wish to draw the same grouping as we would see it from the street level. First, decide how high a person's eye level would be if he were standing beside one of the building. The height of his eyes would be about where the mark is on the door. So this is how you can use it to make sure everything seems about right. So let's say we put a door in here, right? We got a little door going on. And then we decide to say, okay, that's a door. So what eyes? I'm tallish, so let's see, probably about there. So that's going to be the eye line for all of these buildings. We know that if someone is about, if I were to draw a person, and so here's another thing, I'm going to go and skip ahead. It's going to talk about this in a minute. But if I were to so if someone walking out there were a person, that would be about halfway. They'd be about this tall. And then we can use all of that. Say what windows are usually, come down to about there. Oh, and then if this also had a door, you could also do this to see how high that door would be, about there. Okay. So once you have that figured out, you can, move that out in perspective again to determine where the eye line would be, where anyone in reference to that person's eye line, however tall you decide them to be, would be for the rest of the eye line. Can be used in perspective to determine where anything along that same eye line would be, and therefore used to determine heights of windows, doorways, trees, other people. So taking that eye line, this is one of those things where you start to get like, this is the real information. So we have that eye line, but let's go ahead and just say this is a headline of this person here. So anyone standing over there will also be that tall if they're as tall as them. But let's see here. Let's say, you always have someone super close to the camera, so you can just get them really far out here. And that indicates for you that person would also be this tall out here. Seeing how they grow, put them next to each other, nearly twice the size because of the perspective and them being closer to you. And so from that, and you can do that on any plane just by finding that point and then extending it out. So if this person was actually standing over here and you didn't know how to do that, You literally just find a point on this line, extend it out to wherever they would be standing, and put it out there. So this person would look like this, standing here as well, who is also taller than they were back there. And then doubly, really tall, rawr, over here. So this person is the same height as this person. And if both of them are the same height, then everything that they come across within there. And so you can do that. You can basically use any object that you know of or can determine the height of in order to frame the perspective of everything else that you're drawing or working on, just by using this and, shifting around and being like, okay, this person is this tall, so then I should make, I'm not locked in. This person is this tall, so then I should probably make this like this tall. But this is the first really nifty trick in this book that I'm just like, oh, that makes absolute sense. This is doing that, where you can set it out. Another way to find, okay, so a shortcut method. Let's see here. There's another way to find the height of a person standing in the place marked by the cross. Before doing this, we just have two things, the eye level line and another person somewhere in the drawing. Okay, so we have a horizon line. So we'll say here. And so in this case, you know that here's another way to find the height of a person standing at the place marked by a cross. Before doing this, two things, the eye level line, another person somewhere in the drawing. Anything that is the same height as the person may be substituted. Draw a line from the cross straight to the feet of the figure and extend that point to where it crosses the eye line. So we're going to go ahead and do you, not you. Oh, wait, come back. Okay. All right, so we got that, right? I'm figuring this out too as we go. Draw lines starting from the place where the first line crosses the eye line. Extend this line to the head of the figure, then on until it is above the X. So that's creating a, and so this is going to go into other stuff here, but wrong one. So that is the same height in perspective here and there. This is another way of making the man-high wall extending to a vanishing point on the eye level line. It can be used for drawing any standard height objects resting on the ground or floor, such as seated figures, chairs are the worst, tables in a dining hall, or autos on the street. Notice in the above diagram that the method holds true whether the X is in the foreground or in the background. So if we were to say from here, you would And so this person in the background here would be about that tall in perspective to this guy. Any standard measurement may be used. The height of a person is found to be a convenient measuring stick. This is a quick and handy method. So, is there any questions about all of this shenanigans and using height-based references to get perspectives for other things? Anything about the block building and the 2-point perspective we just went over? Also, grats on Francita, by Francita on Twitter and Twitch and everywhere else, who's awesome. Said, we have signed the agreement for the government grant for our video game. So that is super rad. Congratulations. I can't wait to see all of the awesome stuff coming out of it. I'm going to go ahead and hang out a minute here. I'm actually going to go ahead and take my break. It's been about an hour. I usually break every half hour to 45. So I will be right back. I'm going to run a quick ad break, stretch, run to the bathroom, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, now's a good time to get them in so I can come back and answer those. Otherwise, we'll move on. And it looks like we're starting to move into making sure that you don't, making sure object arrangement doesn't clip into each other, stuff like that. So we'll see how that all works out. And that seems pretty quick, so we probably won't cover that too long. Okie dokie. I am back. But yeah, so we can get you all caught up here, Francita. I'll hopefully have videos in a more timely manner coming up here. Okay, so here's the short section on avoiding crowding. Alrighty, let's do this. This is to avoid crowding. So you see this figure up here. Generally, you take a look at it at a glance, it looks fine. But then it's pointing out that doing something in the perspective, if you look at how the perspective follows through with everything, you'll notice there's some overlapping areas because the volume and perspective was not taken into account when they were drawing these shapes. They were just doing a close approximation. So you'll see there is an overlap between this cube and cylinder. That would also happen here. You'll see a overlap where this pyramid and that cylinder run into each other. And then there's also an area here where this sphere would fade into that rectangle. And so this isn't something that I feel like is super easy for me to go ahead and draw and then show you any better than this image does. But I want to ask if everyone is clear on like how, why, one, that is an issue. Two, how they discovered that by extending, you know, all of the other points to check. Like you see how they did all that. With the sphere, you want to drop down here to see where the apex of it is. But you see, does everyone see how all of that works and why they're able to figure that out, and also why you'd want to avoid that? So let's bring these in. Let's see there and there. So we have a city. We have a city. Let's do that. Let's do that. We have a city. It's doing great. It's got some cool buildings. Some fucking sweet ass buildings. There. Got another building going off here. We got a little street, little side street going on there. Got another cool little building you do here. Goes out here. Does this. That is incorrect and goes that way. Yeah, we got buildings. We're building some city up here. But so that all looks correct. But what was happening here is that we were getting into a position where a building is then going to start coming out this direction here, getting super warped. Because it is, and then same thing was happening is going to happen if we go over here. And what we have here is we have a 2-point perspective. And then it slips over and we start getting really weird 1-point perspectives in 2 separate places with this 2-point perspective in the middle. I feel like you could get some really Inception-y weird shit if that's what you're going for out of doing that. But in general, that's not a thing you want to do. And so that's what it was talking about that I tried to show you the picture of. Where once you start getting into and around these 2-point perspective vanishing points, it gets weird. So we want to avoid that unless you really know what you're doing and are just gung-ho to get those weird cityscapes. Roofs. Often roofs have the same slope. The lines of these roofs meet... Ooh, okay, this is something super new for me. We're going to use a vanishing point off of the vertical line for the first time. This is going to be an adventure. Often, groups of roofs have the same slope. The lines of these roofs meet an up and down horizon line, if such a thing can be imagined. This up and down horizon line passes through the true vanishing point A. This is better understood by turning a drawing on its side. The roof of the building H. Okay, I'm looking at a diagram here, so as I read through this, give me a moment to process, and then I can try to play around with it. The roof of the building H lies in the opposite direction of the other buildings. Hence, vanishing points are through life of its roof lie on a line above and below through vanishing point B. Farther apart these roofs, up and down points are spaced, the steeper the roofs. Okay. Now give me a moment to try to figure out how this all works. This is kind of a confusing one. And again, this is all me learning while you learn, so I'm going to play around with it and then we'll see what happens. But I'm a little flubbergated on this one. Okay. Oh. Okay, now I need to figure out how I would place these. So we're going to say this is the line that they would all connect to in psi. But first I'm going to go ahead and make these a little bit more so that we know where the roofs are. You know what? I'm just gonna choose a point. We're gonna work off of it. So this is the vanishing point, and this is the vanishing point for these roofs. And you might be looking at that and going, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Well, let's do this. Okay, so that is going to be the length of that roof. Oh, and then that's where... No, that's not how that's working. Then we're going to do here. Okay, and then so this one will do the same there. And I know this looks like just madness, and it is, but hold on a sec. I promise. Okay, so I know how these line up properly. But it's the secondary line coming up, that one by 6. That's what we needed. Second line on this one is what we needed. Alrighty, I got it figured out. It'll take a little bit. I feel like this is one that I'm going to come back to again next week when we're doing this more, because this is just something I want to practice a little bit more. Maybe practice a little bit today. All right, so this looks like a whole shit ton of lines to you guys. You have no idea what the hell I'm doing, I'm sure. But that is how they are forming the roof. So you did one line from the side you're not seeing. Just this line here. And then these 2 lines here will determine the rest of that roof, that side you see. And then you just have the perspective line drawn across the axe beam. So again, boom. Boom. But yeah, this is starting to make sense to me. This got a little weird because, again, all these extra guys, but we just do this. Boom, boom, and boom. Boom. I can actually just go and do this first this time. Do that. So did that. Like, that was rough. That took me a minute. I'm definitely going to want to play with that a little bit more, probably in the next time through. But I can do it now too. Did that make sense to everyone? Do you have any questions? Would you like me to go over that again? Would you like me to go over that again now that I have a better grasp of it and kind of explain as I go why I'm doing each line? Let me know. Because yeah, that one took me a minute. We're going to do these. Okay, so before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and break these up into actual proper properly lengthed houses. So if you are going to try, like, I want to make all of these homes the same length in perspective. Since things get smaller as they get farther away, it's hard to eyeball it. People end up making things get way huge as they get farther away, even though they look like they're getting smaller. So in this situation, we're going to want to split this into a If we want this one height, I might be using this a little weird for this way, but we can do this easily. So we're going to say like here. Like here. And these are theoretically, I mean, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but these are theoretically all the same. These are all theoretically the same distance apart. So now I'm going to do this. And this is a little weird for the way I'm doing this. I think there's a better way to do it, but it'll still work. So we're going to see if this works in the way I want to use it. But the idea here is that every time this line crosses one of these length lines, you're going to do a vertical line. Oh yeah, this is actually working out. Alright, so then if we were to take this and say each one of these spaces is a space between homes. So the fact that I used a ruler, didn't use a ruler, notwithstanding, these are all theoretically the same size. They're just getting smaller as they go farther back because, as was previously mentioned, perspectives, things get farther away as they get farther back. So this plane is the same size as this plane, which is the same size as this plane, which is the same size as this plane. All of those are exactly the same, and then also all of these are also the same size as the gaps between them. I did that a little weird because of how long it was. So we have our houses. Those are our houses that we want to get figured out. We're going to do a line, and this line right here is on the point A. If these are A and B, A and B vanishing points. And so whether it's point A or B will depend on which side the house is facing. So actually we can play around with that a little bit too. But for the sake of funsies, I'm just going to choose a random point and we're going to say, that's it. If the roof's already drawn and you want to build more, you could follow the lines themselves. But for this, it doesn't particularly matter because we are setting our own angle. Unless it looks super off, in which case we want to adjust it. Really, this is all up to us. So we're going to do a red line. So this first line here is going up here. And so the idea with this, because from where we're standing, we are seeing this side of we're going to see this side of the roof, right? That is the side that's going to be most available to us. Then from up here, this is where we get to see the downturned roof. And then using the beam, the center point of the roof there, we follow the perspective of this grid. And that's going to go from the point where the two meet, because that's the apex of the roof, and then that's just going to define where the back apex of that roof is. So what we have here is a pretty somewhat flat, and then of course we can also decide, does a hangover, because most roofs hang over a little bit. So then we have, for this roof, that's a pretty big hangover, but that is how I had it set up over on that side. So that is just my bad, and not the perspective. Again, that's just bad design work, and whoever built these houses, what the fuck. But yeah, so that's how we get a roof there. That's a pretty shallow roof, but we could always choose to... Did that make sense? Did you understand why I did all of the lines that I did? First off, before we carry on to play around with this a little bit longer, my new point for these guys are going to be there and there. And I want to play with getting a better roof in there. And we're going to go through. And so we leave that point, and then we go through the corner of the wall of the house. Just clip that plane. Because that is where, you know, obviously this is going to depend on how the house is built. If the house has some overhang, it might be out there. But for simplicity's sake of explaining what we're doing, clips that wall. Going to do the same thing here. Then we're going to come up here. We're going to grab... And so the fun thing about this, the thing I like about this here, is that the placement of both of these don't have to be precise because they inform themselves. With perspective being what it is, like... If I were to have this one, move this one down here, right? But I have this point here. That's still the correct... It's just a different shaped roof, but it still works. You're not going to... Unless you maybe get super low, you're not going to get too much warping out of that. So that's really cool. Then we'll take this. Whoop. Do that there. We'll say maybe instead of having it super long, we'll do this. And then this actually has very little... and we'll say about there. So then this roof here, we'll do this one in like a bright purple. And then so you see how this one's a little higher than that one because we changed those points. And then again, we can just push those off farther as we need to, just like these vanishing points. If it's a really high point, we may need to push them completely off of the page down here. Let's do something real high though. Let's get a really high steeped, and then I can kind of adjust these as I need to. There you go, it's pretty close. Then we're going to do the same thing from here. We're going to push this really high up. That's about right there. So this is cool. This is the first time of like, this is something completely new to me. Some of the stuff like I didn't know how to do, but I'd seen it around. But this one is completely new to me. So this has been cool. Let's say you... And then so, just for simplicity's sake, we'll also bounce back over here. And we're going to do the last house on this. Because we can. Oh, this actually, I need to go ahead and figure out where that is. So let's go ahead and grab this in perspective. So let's go ahead and grab you in perspective. All right, so that's where that's going to be. Ooh, that is seeing a little bit of warping, isn't it? Let's take a look here. Might need to explore this a little bit more, because yeah, that seems to be, it's not going along the line I want. It's kind of a pain in the ass. I have discovered an issue that I do not know how to resolve at the moment. Whew. I don't know what to do about that one. It is interesting, to say the least. And should be working, and it is not. Which I'm meaning to believe that this is, I probably fucked up on this thing here a little bit. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see where this mess up happens. It already starts to go a little off kilter there. Immediately. Interesting. That's interesting. So this is cool. And I definitely see why it's working, but I don't see why this isn't working. Might be just getting too close. That shouldn't be as big of an issue, though. These ones all got pretty close. And farther the roof of the building H lies the opposite direction. Hence, vanishing points of the roof lie in a line above and below the vanishing points B. Farther apart these up and down points are spaced, the steeper the roofs. Why? Alright, so this is what we got going on here. Let's move this all the way up here. And then luckily for me, it actually provides me with the vanishing points I need to check this work. So A is the vanishing point. And it's pretty close. That might just be, that's off enough just that is my my personal just slightly off. All right, so I feel like those rooftops should be the same. So I'm a bit curious at this. because these seem to be, based on what it's showing here, on the same plane. So it's possible this one's thinner. Issue could be because we're not seeing the same size houses. So we're going to call this one a win for the moment. So this is if we're looking at it this way. But what if basically the houses were rotated so that, and I'm going to make a really long house here with a really not very steep roof, or a very steep roof, as the case may be. So we're going to say they're coming off of B because the house is a different. And then we'll say right about here. It's like, feels like a trading center, trading post or something to me. In fact, I'm going to do this. I'll do this because I feel like this is the type of thing where, like, the roof, it's like one of those triangle buildings and the roof kind of forms little storage areas. Is what I'm going with there. So that would be like, if this house rotated, you do it from the other side, from point B. So I understand why this works. I enjoy having the opportunity to be able to play with this. There are some confusing things that we need to figure out. I may spend some time looking into that. And then also that may get filled up later, because for some reason these houses, these roofs should all be in line, and they're not from this particular angle. So that's intriguing. It's possible. It's possible that you just have to adjust the roof angle from that line once you have that first. Let's see what happens if I do that. So let's see what happens if I just. See, I don't even know where to just. Yeah, see, that's just not. You know what? It's possible that as you move farther back, you need to change the adjustment. That this would work. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna figure this out real quick. I have an idea. Placement is key, and I know what it's going to answer later. But let's go ahead and say we have this house here. Moving closer to us. Nope. So yeah, that is I understand why it works for the individual houses, but I feel like the vanishing point needs to change based on the specific positioning of the house, because that roof should be adjusted differently. So we're I'm going to keep. I understand some of why it works, and I'm going to keep poking around at that in the future. But we are into really untested waters here, so I will probably have to do some Googling as well. So I'm going to call it here. Thank you so much for hanging out, and